We're going to start, I think. My name is Joanna Rosinska. I'm the Senior Program Officer for Europe, including Ukraine, which is our largest program here. And I just wanted to welcome you all to our event this afternoon. We're quite excited to have a number of our partners in town and take advantage of their presence. And we're very, first of all, a huge thank you to the staff, both of the Ukrainian program and SEMA. And this is a joint, how would you say, a joint event for us that we're quite proud and happy of. So my huge thanks to the staff first and foremost. And from here, I'm just going to give it over to Mark, who's the director for SEMA.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to just make sure the mic is working. That's going better. Okay, sorry about the low mic on you at that time, but we'll get it better this time, I think. Welcome. I'm the Senior Director for the Center for International Media Assistance, as Johanna said, and we're really excited about this opportunity to take a look at what's going on in Ukraine. I just want to tell a little story before we start about what happened to me 26 years ago. When I was a reporter for the Wall Street Journal, I went to Ukraine to report on the the announcement, which happened while I was in the country, that Ukraine was leaving the Soviet Union, and then later to write a story which involved a lot of reporting across the whole country. And I had my first exposure to Ukraine, being guided around by really enthusiastic people who were very optimistic about the future. And I wrote one of the first stories that basically said that Ukraine was going to be a really important and quick study in transforming to a open democratic system and market economy, and that the relative wealth of the country would create enormous opportunities, and it would be much easier than other parts of the Soviet Union, perhaps not including the Baltic states. So I started off with a way too rosy picture of what would take place in the next 26 years, but I have followed it with, still believing that one day Ukraine's time will come, and this year has been something of an exciting year for us in the media space because there have been some developments. And there have been some important things going on in the country that are really important. And today, Freedom House launched its first, oh, is it there? Can you turn off the lights? For some reason, the slides went away. Anyway, today, Freedom House launched its freedom of the press indicators. And there were some, mild improvements in the situation as we can see it in Ukraine. And I don't know if we'll be able to get this back up or not in time to make sense of it, but maybe we'll be able to get it up a bit later. It does seem that there have been some legislative improvements, some movements on the public service media front, and some indications that there is growing political will to reform the media sector and to make it somewhat more competitive and open to new players and less concentrated in the hands of the oligarchs. So those kinds of movements are encouraging, but we also have a lot of other issues going on in the country, including a really serious disinformation campaign that continues from Russia and other kinds of problems that we're going to really go down into this and talk about today, because our theme is going to be about trust in media and how whether or not Ukraine is going to be successful in building a trustworthy media sector. So I want to turn first. We still have not. Is there nobody? Because Roman has slides as well. give us 1 second here. Do we know why it went off?
Maybe I can.
Is it controllable over there? No. Okay. Can you do it without your slides? Okay. So Roman has made some nice slides that we won't be able to see. They were up here when I came in the room, so I don't know what happened. But tell us a little bit about here we go.
Hey.
Okay, here we go. Let's look just first at quickly at the slide from Freedom House this morning that, see if I can get it to advance.
I think it's about Freedom House.
Still not working. Can you go to the second slide?
Oh, here it is.
Okay.
Sorry.
The second slide. Okay, so this is the data that came out this morning from Freedom House, and it shows that there is still a long way to go in reaching a situation that is more moving toward a free press. And you see that there have been some positive movements and some negative ones. On the legal environment, it has stayed flat. On the political environment, it's gone down 1. On the economic environment, it's gone up 1. So it's not moving in a major way, but it does show that there is movement, and that's one important thing. So I'm going to turn to Roman, and we'll see. There we go.
Can I say a quick comment
Yes, of
to
course.
this slide? Internet penetration in Ukraine 63%, not 40%. This is official data from our researcher who do research for Internet Association of Ukraine. So yeah, in mind, it's the company in mind. So it's a little bit bigger than 40.
Okay, well, good. That's great. I mean, I guess they use an official figure or something. But, as you can see, the overall picture is that it's partly free. I'm going to first turn to Roman Shutov, who is the director of Detector Meter. He came in this morning from Kiev, and I want you to tell us a little bit about the overall picture on the legislative side, where there have been some movements, and some of the challenges that you see in the overall picture. And we can use your slides here now.
Thank you, colleagues. It's a pleasure for me to be here and to talk to you. I'll say a couple of words about general trends. No, don't watch this slide. It's still too early for it. In Ukraine, during the last 3 years, after the event that you know as the Revolution of Dignity, in fact, Ukrainian media landscape, Ukrainian media environment has done a significant way towards better transparency and better, it became closer to real democratic standards, I think. On the first hand, we have the media that are free but not independent. Why they are free? Because in Ukraine we have really no state, we have no government censorship. It had been during the time of Viktor Yanukovych, the former president, but now we have no government pressure against media. But on the other hand, our media are to a great extent dependent on their owners. Ukrainian media are not business. Ukrainian media are not self-sufficient. And if you're a journalist, if you're an editor, you cannot raise money. That's why your media outlet always needs additional funding, and that's why our media are dependent from those who pay to them. And we in Ukraine, we have a huge problem that we call as oligarch-owned media. These media are used by the owners as a tool to promote their own political interests, economic interests, and that's why they are still far from the standards of balance, of neutrality, and so on. Yeah, when we speak about general issues, they may be balanced and neutral, but when we speak about some political issue, when we speak about elections, when we speak about some special interests of some special oligarch and his conflicts with other oligarchs, so here we have distortions, we have manipulations, and here we have a huge mass of lies delivered to our citizens. On the other hand, we have the state-owned sector of media that is significantly decreasing. First of all, I speak about the public broadcasting. Just imagine that before the reform, our government controlled the one huge national TV channel, radio stations, and a network of 26 local TV and radio broadcasters. It's a huge machine, old Soviet-style machine that was on the state balance and that was used by government and local governments as a tool of the propaganda. I will not speak much about this reform because here we have Tatiana who will talk you much more. But I will say only that all this system now is being transformed to public broadcaster. It is not state-owned anymore. On the other hand, we had, may I take the...
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. On the other hand, we had 500, very nice figure, you know, 555 state-owned and local government-owned printed media outlets. A huge number.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah,
555. And now we have another reform that forces this media to be privatized. And in 3 years, and in fact in 2 years, all this media must become private. Yeah, on the one hand, we have the good result that the government-controlled sector of media is being decreased, significantly decreased. And in fact, our government will control only a military TV channel for soldiers and foreign broadcaster, and seems nothing more. So first, I noticed about I mentioned about oligarch-owned media. Second, I pay attention on the decreasing of state-owned media sector. And the third is that in Ukraine we have really independent media. They are not numerous. They exist on both national and local level, but unfortunately they are to a great degree dependent on donor funding because they cannot find the resources inside Ukraine. Our citizens receive no incomes enough to pay to this media. That's why these media outlets, they mostly receive grant support from abroad, and they exist due to this support. That is not sustainable, we know. Independent media, and a couple of words about local media. Local media have a great potential to be one of the most credible sources of information to local people. Why so? Look at this slide. Here you see this slide is about the sources of news for Ukrainian citizens. Still, 87% of Ukrainian citizens receive the news from the national TV channels. But this is about use, not about trust. The trust is dramatically low. The trust is about 42%. This is not typical for Ukraine. And this problem appeared 3 years ago after the Revolution of Dignity, when our TV channels were against Maidan, and they compared the Maidan with fascists and so on. But when the revolution won, these oligarch-owned TV channels, they changed their position to the opposite, and they started to glorify all these protests. And the citizen asked, what is it? Why so? Yesterday they were fascists, today they are good guys. And the level of trust to national media fell. Now it is not high because first the people remember all this change. They understand that oligarch-owned media, they will not say the truth. But second, sometimes people don't care about the truth. They care about agenda. They care about what this TV channel talk to them. Our citizens, they're not, in fact, interested in our local, our small political conflicts, who beat whom in our parliament. They are interested in reforms, how they will live in 2 days, yesterday and the day after yesterday. Tomorrow and day after tomorrow. And but they receive no information like this. That's why they turn from mainstream media and go where? They go to internet and they go to relatives, friends, neighbors, colleagues, people-to-people conversation. We understand that
I'm not sure people can see that, but that's the one that is 47.7, relatives, friends, neighbors, and colleagues. That's 47.7.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's very untypical, and it's very dangerous because this is not, in fact, the trustworthy source of information. You know. And that's why this fall of trust to mainstream media gives the window of opportunity to local media outlets, because they have no such reputation of oligarch-owned and manipulated media, and that have a potential to fill in this gap of trust, if they will be capable enough, if they are able enough to produce the balanced news, to produce the neutral reporting, and to become the real trustworthy source of information to citizens. I think that this is that here I can make a point and to give the floor to my colleagues because they have very many interesting things.
We'll come back to this because I think these points are really important, and you've basically laid out the overall environment. There's been some important legislation that has been passed, some privatization, changes in ownership, and the possibility of a much more shifting of attention from the centrally controlled media in the capital to a broader ownership across the country. So those are interesting trends, even if we still have a lot of work to do in this area. I'd like to turn now to Tatiana and to ask her. She is the chair of the supervisory board of the National Public Broadcasting Company. This is one of the areas where there has been some incredibly important movement this year, and we were heartened by this as well, because one of the things that Ukraine needs is at least one source of information that is not in the hands of a oligarch and that is not being manipulated. Now, maybe we're making some steps in that direction, and I hope so. Can you tell us what you think? Is it going to work? Is it going to be an independent public broadcasting system that can bring truth into the and trust into the media space?
Yeah. Thank you. Я буду говорити, вибачте, українською. Пані Матільда допоможе мені спілкуватись з вами. Дійсно, я щаслива, що сьогодні я можу говорити про національне суспільне телебачення і радіомовлення України не в гіпотетичному, а в такому достатньо реалістичному ключі. І можу сказати, що ця надважлива реформа створення суспільного стартувала. За той період після прийняття закону в 2014 році створено передумови для того, щоб нарешті з'явилось суспільне, в справжньому сенсі цього слова, телебачення і радіомовлення в Україні.
Okay.
I will speak Ukrainian. Can you hear me? Does it work? Sorry.
Hold it close to your mouth.
Okay. I'll speak Ukrainian, so there will be, pardon me, there will be interpreting. I'm very happy today that I have this opportunity to talk about our national public broadcasting as not a hypothetical phenomenon, but rather in realistic sense of its word. The reform that already started, has the basis for the creation of national public broadcasting in the country. And the law that was passed in 2014 sets the basis for the creation of real national public broadcasting in Ukraine.
Дійсно, я назвала цю реформу надважливою. Я думаю, що це головна медіареформа в Україні. Чому саме? Є три причини.
I named this reform as a very important, the key reform, and there are very good reasons, three major reasons why the reform is super important in Ukraine.
Перша – це позбавитись від державної підтримки телерадіомовлення, від кишенькових державних засобів масової інформації, які ми дістали у спадщину від Радянського Союзу саме з усіма негативними якостями.
First of all, we are able to get rid of state media, something that we inherited from the Soviet Union with all of its negative sides. Другий резон – це такий іспит, індикатор готовності політичних і владних структур сприйняти нарешті ідею абсолютно незалежного, суспільного в повному значенні цього слова медіа, яке буде давати збалансовану, об'єктивну інформацію і не матиме таких дверцят, в які можна зайти і сказати, що і як робити. And the second reason is that this is actually a test, that is a test for the preparedness of political and government forces to actually create and assist with creation of really independent media that would provide very balanced and objective information without any distortion.
Ну і третя причина – це те, що в умовах війни з Росією, інформаційної агресії, гібридної війни, нарешті з'явиться в умовах суспільства постправди, нарешті з'явиться таке джерело постійної об'єктивної інформації, яке може стати таким зразком для всіх інших медіа. Бо сьогодні дійсно олігархічні медіа надають дуже тенденційну інформацію, таку інформацію, з якою громадянин України не може зробити всіх необхідних йому висновків.
In this situation that we are having now in the environment of the war with Russia, we have noticed that there is information aggression, and finally we are going to be able to, in this situation, create very objective and independent media. And this will be, or we hope so, this will be a very good example for other media, example for media to get rid of one-sided, oligarch-presented information. And we finally will be able to get, instead of distortion, we will be able to get more independent and more objective information.
Як я сказала, вже зроблені всі необхідні передумови для початку роботи суспільного мовника, але є дуже багато ризиків.
As I said earlier, we have basis for the creation of public broadcasting, but there are quite a few risks.
Перший і такий головний ризик – це все ж таки спроби політичного втручання і впливу, і ми вже відчули на собі дуже конкретні приклади таких спроб.
The first risk is some attempts of political intervention, political influence, and we already have experience and have felt that there are some attempts of having this political interference and influence.
Поки що наглядова рада витримує цей тиск і робить все можливе, щоб все ж таки заборонити будь-яке втручання.
And so far, our supervisory board was able to get out of it, not to get under the influence of these interferences and pressure, and we were able to avoid it.
Але ми вже отримали такий натяк, що якщо сьогодні по закону не можна втручатись в діяльність наглядової ради чи суспільного мовника, то чи не варто змінити закон?
But we already heard somebody mention that even though the law does not allow today any kind of intrusion, any kind of influence, but there are some people who suggest that maybe we should change the law.
Тобто, на жаль, політична еліта все ж таки не розуміє по-справжньому, що таке суспільне в його канонічному значенні.
Unfortunately, our political elite does not understand very well what public broadcasting means in its essence.
Україна змінилась, суспільство змінилось, змінилась аудиторія, але поки що політики трошки гальмують в цьому процесі.
Well, the country has changed, Ukraine has changed, the society has changed, and the audience has changed. But unfortunately, politicians are still not catching up.
Друга така ризикована ситуація – це те, що сьогоднішній оцей публічний мовник об'єднаний має 7,5 тисяч працівників. І це люди абсолютно не готові працювати в суспільному дискурсі і з парадигмою суспільною.
The second risk that we face in our country is in this united public broadcasting that we have today is that we have 7,500 employees and they are not ready to actually work in this public broadcasting paradigm.
Тому оптимізація структури і створення нового колективу – це буде дуже болючий процес і буде спротив.
So, and that's why the creation of and change of the organizational structure will lead to some difficulties and some kind of resistance.
Ну і третій ризик, такий важливий, чи зможе нова команда, яку ми обираємо, новий керівник, створити такий суспільний контент, який дійсно буде потрібен суспільству, запитаний суспільством і буде задовольняти суспільний інтерес.
And the third very important risk that we have, or challenge, is whether the new team and the new leader who will be elected will be able to provide this public content that will be needed for the public, will be actually sought by the public, and meet the expectation of the public.
Але я оптимістично налаштована і впевнена, що з увагою медіаспільноти, яку ми відчуваємо постійно, з підтримкою донорських організацій в тому числі, і з новою командою ми все ж таки зможемо зробити все необхідне, щоб нарешті в Україні публічне суспільне телебачення, радіомовлення запрацювало.
But I'm optimistic about it, and with the attention that this issue gets, with the together with the whole public media, and with the community of public media, and with the support of our donors, I'm very optimistic that the new team will be able to meet these challenges and implement all the changes that are needed in Ukraine.
Thank you, Tatiana. Your last point, I think, is really important because what we've seen in countries that have had successful reforms and successful transformations of public broadcasters from state to public interest broadcasting, it has been a result of a coalition of forces coming together, wide public dialogue, educating parliamentarians, trying to build the case for independent media in society, and this can have knock-on effects to other parts of the media system. So I want to turn to Katarina now. Katarina is the executive director of the Independent Association of Broadcasters. You have been here with us several times in the past, and we've always been really interested to learn what's going on in the media space. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about this political will question. You have mentioned to me that you feel that there is some political will for change in the country, and that there is some movement, and that there is a shift in the centralization problem because there's a little bit more attention now in the regions. Tell me a little bit about how you see the environment now in Ukraine.
Thank you, Mark. First of all, I'm really happy to hear so big interest in Ukraine and so many people in the room, and I'm happy that we can speak every year about the Ukrainian media situation. So yeah, I think that we have a kind of political will among our parliamentaries and politicians, pushed a lot by our media developers and civil society activists. Unfortunately, we still have a lot of work to do in media legislation. We still need a new law on audiovisual services that should be like new legislation on television and radio. According our agreement with on association with EU, we see more and more initiatives on the content regulation. Of course, because it's mostly motivated by war, conflict, and a lot of informational interference from Russia and inside of the country. We need to be aware that, and Roman showed us that not much people, in fact, get information from Russian television, but there is a bunch of TV channels, for example, that provide Russian narrative inside of the country. And that's why we strongly need, because content regulations in many cases is very close to censorship, and we need to be very careful with this issue. That's why we need a good mechanism of co-regulation and self-regulation. And here we also have a good news, because now we have a quite hopeful discussion in the big TV industry. We have this like negotiation with with Starlight Media Group that owned by Mr. Pinchuk, but they realize they need to create co-regulation mechanism, and we hope this year we will have not only steps from industry, but in legislation sphere.
And are they basing that on sort of international standards, or how are they doing?
Definitely. We, together with Detector Media, our association, Starlight Media and Detector Media, we have a huge like project. We analyze 8 models that used in different countries: Canada, France, Sweden, Great Britain, like many, and we now on the basis of these models, we're creating our Ukrainian models. So it's really, for me, it's very promising process. And why we need to work closely with big TV channels in this process, because we need to create national system of co-regulation, and it's very important. I want to little bit back to figures that Roman gave us and tell you about other research that was made by Institute of International Republican Institute. That was 3rd annual Ukrainian municipal survey, and they not only ask question about the like different kinds of authorities, but also about media. So they ask, do you approve the work of following government, non-government entities? And local media get about, so strongly approve about 10% average, and some would approve about 40%. So and these numbers is growing from year to year.
This is local media. Trust in local media.
Trust in local media.
More or less 50% who
even
have,
bigger.
Yeah.
It's about like 50-55. So this gives us big opportunities to speak about trustful media. So we have here PBS that already was taken. We have here potentially community media that still need to be developed on the local level, on the level of the small cities, 1 districts of oblasts, and we have here regional companies that work in the oblast centers for 1 or 2 oblasts. We just recently finalize our big research on the issues that influence on financial sustainability and media in Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. And this has given us a lot of information to think about. I will share with you only 3 slides, not to give you a lot. So this main numbers on TV, and here we have regional and local. Oh, sorry. Here we have regional and local, and what interesting for us was, so you can see the structure of their expenses, and look how small numbers for production. They 10 and 6%. They don't have money for production, their own product, and they don't have much money to.
So what are these?
So here we have a number of staff.
Okay.
Average number of staff for regional TV it's about 100 people. For local, it's about 40. We have it's this line. So 52 and 18. So very small teams. The annual incomes in euro, it's about 100,037. So it's quite small numbers. They earn. You can compare with how much they spend. 48 and 60. But you can see that this figure was very interesting for us. That local companies spent much more than they earn. So
how are they covering those deficits? Does that mean they're going into debt? Is that the way they're doing that?
They expecting for elections, so they go into debt and then cover it with election money. They're going into debt and covering with elections money. This is a system. That's why why we're speaking about local only as a community media. We need non-profit model here.
Yeah.
They cannot be in the local level, and we need to raise awareness of what community media is, how they work, what the model for them. But here we have potential for sustainability. We was a little bit about this one. So incomes from other sources. This is the amount of product, different kind of.
So that's 10,000 euros.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. This is how much they earn from the percent.
That's a percent. Okay.
Yeah, it's about 10%. It's about 10,000 euros. Yeah.
Percent. Okay, got it.
Yeah. So this is, as we understand, because we do a SWOT analysis, we ask 80 companies to fill in the questionnaire with about 120 questions and give us these numbers. So this look like how big media corruption on the regional level, because this here is media corruption. It's all kind of for paid, but it's not so big. So it's give us much more on the local level. Look how big numbers. And this is other figures from radio. And radio is a business in Ukraine. And this is good news for us, but they earn, they have earned more than 100,000, and they spend
52.
52, so it's much less. So
52%, okay.
Yeah, so to give you more, this is from our SWOT analysis, is top weaknesses of the companies where we can work on their sustainability. And this is not giving you can read it. So lack of strategy, lack of resources for development. They don't have money. We have very expensive loans in Ukraine. It's very expensive to go in bank and ask for money for development, and lack of management skills. This is 3 big lacks that we need to work on, definitely. And we also made, with this research, we made a big past analysis, political, economical, social, and technical, external factors that influence, and we have 2 big ones. The first is absolutely unstable legislation. The different new arrivals from parliament, from regulators, don't give to media companies possibility to understand how their work will look like and how their basis for their work will look like in the next 6 months, 1 year, and the second one is, of course, new technologies. They definitely afraid, many of them afraid of new media, new technologies rising, and they're not able to attract the audience below 30. So when we're speaking about sustainability and possibility to win, we definitely see here, and IREX media index shows us quite the same trend. We have a good rise in the freedom, but very small dynamic in the business.
Yeah.
So if we want media to be successful, we need to help them to be sustainable.
One of the interesting things about what's happening now in Ukraine is that you've started to move the enabling environment in the right direction. And you're starting to get some legislation that is starting to have the right contours, creating public service broadcasting, starting to regulate ownership issues, and we'll talk a little bit more about that because the ownership thing is a big thing. So you're saying that as those things move, now we need to focus more on the skills and the management capacities of the enterprises and how to survive and how to make this sustainable and workable.
Yeah, because when media weak, it's a very good field for media corruption, for buying media by different kind of business groups and businessmen that have political.
Yeah, so when it's weak, it's very easy for the oligarchs to come in and take over.
And in fact, we had in the East such trend last year when some oligarch groups have big interest to buy regional companies, those who work in oblasts, because they understand how regional media important in decentralization process, how important to have control on the watchers when big amount of money go to the regional level, big amount of possibility to go to the regional authorities, and it more and more very important question for the life of people will be decided on the regional level and on the local level. And if nobody will look after the authorities, it will be very easy to. And one more very important issue, and I think it's for us, it's crucial for international media developers and international donors to be more active and look close on the process. We still, as I said, we have a lack of community media so we don't have much those who work as a non-profit closely with their community, with very good communication with their community, because we have this post-Soviet municipal media system, press and some TV, and not much in radio. In fact, press and TV is big two groups. And recently we received very dangerous, for our point of view, initiative from our parliament is to create system of radios that owned by village and district councils. So it's a kind of, and they calling it community media. So definitely we need to be very strong in providing right model of community media in Ukraine, because this is very important player on the local level, especially in the decentralization.
That's a really important point, and it does sort of say that the international community could help in that way.
Definitely.
I want to turn to Johanna now to tell us a little bit about how the National Endowment for Democracy programs are engaging in this process. You said it was the largest NED program. How are we dealing with this opportunity that's happening right now?
Well, the largest NED program in Europe.
In Europe, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
So I'll narrow that down.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. And also, I'm so grateful that our partners are here, because it's always a great opportunity for audiences in Washington to kind of hear from the horse's mouth as to what's actually happening, instead of having it from second and third hand. So because NED is not a media donor per se, and we're certainly not a media development organization, we look at media as part of a vital component in a healthy democratic ecosystem. And so we treat it more as part of the wider processes that are happening. And obviously, a vital media is incredibly important to kind of moving processes forward. From our point of view, a lot of the results that have come out of this polling is heartening, since it's kind of been our approach for a number of years to position, to support local media specifically in underserved areas, but as part of this kind of like grassroots movement to put pressure up and to continue and consolidate the processes that were begun by the Maidan, probably the most important being a re-examination of the relationship between government and its people and what that power structure is supposed to look like. And media owners recognizing that they don't just have a passive audience, but they actually have consumers to whom they have to be responsible, hopefully is going to also be part of a larger trend, and eventually your politicians will figure that out as well. So, you know, the way that we look at it is to, in our very modest way, support what is already happening. And I think that one of the most positive things that I have heard, especially out of this, is the fact that there is a tendency to self-regulation, which is the most important component to make all of the reforms that have begun irreversible. And that's what we're striving for. I don't think we're quite there with Ukraine yet, but we're almost there. I think we're very close. The process of decentralization is key, I believe. The devolution of economic authority and power and responsibility, but also changing, again, the relationship between governing and governed on all levels, and media playing a key role to that. And again, you know, the discussions that they have, what's the difference between propaganda, is also the difference of speaking of at people and speaking with people, and changing the relationship of that. You know, so we're quite pleased to be a part of all of that. You know, the larger trends in terms of transparency of media ownership and all of these are also quite important, I think. Yeah. But what role we can play in that, I think, is less important, rather than, again, creating the opportunities for people to demand that, I would say, and also demanding that there be a change in editorial policies or interference, so that it does become more responsible to a common good.
Good. Well, I want to go back to Roman and ask you to talk a little bit about this ownership transparency mechanism that that has been launched. I mean, there's been some effort to clarify both who owns the media and what the interests of the owners are. And tell us a little bit about where that stands right now, because that seems to be one of your continuing issues of influence and control by people who have political or economic interests rather than the interests of the public in mind. How is that working?
Slide for that.
Slide back.
Transparency.
Okay.
Yeah, really, in Ukraine we have the new law that requires that the broadcasters, TV and radio broadcasters, only TV broadcasters,
TV and radio.
TV and radio.
Yeah. TV
and radio broadcasters are obliged to disclose their owners, their final beneficiaries. And this law was adopted 1 year ago, and now we have the first practice of its implementation. And we really consider it as a step forward towards better transparency and democracy of media landscape, because we consider it more as a more civilized way how we manage media. Is that people should know who owns what.
How does it get disclosed? Is there an annual report, or how do you know?
In Ukraine, we have a media regulator, is National Council of TV and Radio Broadcasting, and they receive all this information from the broadcaster. Broadcasters are obliged to submit this information annually. Uh-huh. And the National Council, the regulator, accepts all this information, collects it, and so on. But the problem is that the regulator is not has no power, has no authority to check the information, and in fact has no capacity, imagine, to check all the information.
They don't have capacity.
They don't have capacity. Try to check all this information submitted by all the broadcasters. It's impossible. And sometimes, when sometimes the regulator has some doubts if the broadcasters submitted true or false information, they even have nowhere to address. Even they cannot address to the security service of Ukraine with request to check this information, because there are no authorized to do this as well.
Is the media covering that, or are they trying to disclose or find the answers and not so much?
In fact, the media report, broadcasters report, and they submit the information, and this is more or less truth. But but you understand that some media owners that are not interested to be disclosed.
Right.
For example, some oligarchs who are hidden in Moscow now, and they use the media outlets, the TV channels as a tool to disseminate criminal narratives. They are not interested to be disclosed.
And they own through offshore financial centers. So they actually have bank accounts in other countries, and they've set these things up in other countries, and they're no longer transparent at all inside.
And that's why regulators receive the false information, the information about this offshore citizens and structures that formerly own the TV channel, but in fact another person stands behind them.
And how much of that is Russian, the false owners, or is it mostly just Ukrainian?
In fact, they are mostly Ukrainians, but they are connected with Russians. In Ukraine, we have no problem we have very little problem that Ukrainian media listen to Russian media, Ukrainian citizens listen to Russian media or consume Russian-made product. No, in Ukraine we have, as Katerina already told, in Ukraine we have a problem that our own oligarchs, our own media disseminate Kremlin narratives.
Yeah, can I add here? So you should understand that National Council last year received about 2,000 package of documents about the different owners of different TV companies. Big one as Inter 1+1, and very small one, cable operators, cable providers, and all kind of media companies work on the market. They have three people to work with this bunch of documents and to systematize it, analyze it, and find any kind of false errors and check them. So it's one problem. Other problem, if any oligarch or any company saying that this guy owned this company, and we know that it's not really true. You need to go to offshore, pay money to get the information from there. And National Council don't have much money to do such requests, and especially now when we have many budget, of course we have mostly budget money go to the war needs. And so the third problem, this is and for me it's most crucial problem, that according to our legislation, media company have no possibilities of influence on their beneficiary. So if beneficiaries say that I don't want to give information about myself, about my family, about my children, no, I will not give it to you. So company is not able to provide this information to the National Council, and National Council should go to court and start case on the annulation of the license. But I'm personally very afraid of such court cases, because I'm absolutely sure that according to our constitution, court will say that there is no impossible to take an obligation that you have possibility to fulfill it, to know ways how you can influence, and this is biggest problem of our legislation.
So you've got a legislative problem in the way the law was written.
Yeah, and now I know that now National Council is working on the new changes to the law, because they're now, after a year of practice, they understand these bunch of problems, but lack of capacity is still
And is anybody trying to fix that? Is there any donor or anybody trying to help that process, or are you getting support from anyone?
I know that Council of Europe work a lot with National Council on TV and Radio, but unfortunately, when we're speaking about capacity, we're speaking about salaries and we're speaking about all kind of equipment. And you know better than I how easy get money for such expenses, especially when we're saying you need to understand that donor not able to pay salaries to the employees of state authorities. So it's still very, very complicated issue.
Yeah.
But in fact, the regulator in this issue, has support from civil society.
Yes.
Yeah. And we really support it. And this is about the contradiction between the interests of industry and interests of society, of both regulator and civil society. And the issue is who will win.
Yeah.
Now we are discussing the new law on the audiovisual services, and the new scope of powers of the regulator will be fixed there. And now we have this huge discussion on this scope of powers.
But in fact, industry is not also like calling the here, because part of industry who open the beneficiary, who show the structure, say, why should I do it and this other company not? So industry also have different interests in this.
And civil society, when you talk about civil society, tell us a little bit about civil society. Which civil society, and what is how is it organized? Is it you guys, or is it? Are there a lot of you? Is it is it a wide coalition?
No, only just us.
In fact, there are much more quite strong and influential NGOs in Ukraine, think tanks in Ukraine, that are focused on media, on freedom of speech, on democratic governments, and so on. And it's not only us.
It's not just you.
Not only us.
But you feel that it's strong and that it's well organized.
We have very strong group of media watchers. Detector is the best one, but also there's Institute of Mass Information doing very good job. Also, we have a group of associations that work and trying to develop different part of media, like press publishers association. We have internet association. We have a few cable providers association. We also have those who work with media literacy. Again, Director Association of Ukrainian Press. We have Academy of Ukrainian Press. We have a project on media literacy. So
the media literacy. Tell me, just stay on that for 2 seconds. Is there a movement to try to increase media literacy across the country, or is it just small things?
Yeah, I can say that now media literacy is much more in the focus than it used to be a few years ago. And I think it's very right thing to do, because two answers to the propaganda and all that is sustainable media and critical thinking. And you will if you will have this on the table, you will be good enough. So we have already as a part of school programs course on media literacy for children, and it's there is a big job doing by Academy of Ukrainian Press. They work a lot with teachers to teach them how to work with young people and to understand what media literacy is. Detector made a very good project with all kind of web platform.
Yeah, we have a website dedicated to media literacy. Its audience is more than 700,000 already. It's quite old and now
700,000 what?
Of visitors.
Visitors.
Visitors annual audience.
Annual.
But I wanted to say that there are some quite strong NGOs working on the national level, but we have a problem that this activism is very unseen on the local level.
Yeah.
We have no some kind of network of local NGOs promoting, communicating media literacy among different social groups, and this is a problem. We have no capacity of local NGOs, and we try to do something with this.
We with our project, supported by National Endowment for Democracy with Kina Media, this is a festival, a kind of creative environment for thinking about role of media for young people, for those who first and second year of university especially. We now have developed already a group of partners in this region, small town, that are interested to have such activities, and we have see very strong interest from different creative spaces like hubs, to have such activities in there. So media literacy become a topic and an issue. Yeah.
So that's a really important factor, and it sounds like you're thinking about it in a holistic, society-wide way, which is really important too. This media literacy thing, we heard from, when we did a consultation in Southeast Asia from a lot of the players and civil society players in that space there, they saw media literacy as one of their major issues. But they said that much of what had been done on that topic had been done in very small way and just little things here and little things there, and that they needed something that would be more generalized in the school system and other, and to reach more people, because it's really a societal thing, and you have to reach young people as well as other players, and you can have a possibility of people who have a lot of influence and who reach other people, but they were saying we really need to focus on this. So that is a really important, you're starting to think about it in the right way.
What is important is that young people is playing a crucial role here, because you can, through them, reach others, like their family, their mothers, fathers, and it's also one of the strategies.
I mean, if I can chime in, because it also goes back to, for better or for worse, if 47% of people trust the information that they get from friends and family, then yes, that's exactly it. I mean, from kind of the donor point of view, media, the danger with some of kind of sexy topics like media literacy, it's not a single thing. You can't just do media literacy in and of itself. It has to be incorporated into other programs, and whether it's education reform, for example, that it has to be kind of mainstreamed in through the work with the teachers is a great idea. It's not something that we necessarily do, but I mean, I find it really laudable. What we generally find is that it's a component, it comes in somewhere in any number of programs, and I think that hitting different generations, different target audiences is kind of a way. I mean, it's at least, the big thing is that it's become recognized as a major issue, right?
That's
I mean,
right.
whether it's critical thinking, whether it's whatever, and so it takes time to wash its way through the system, but I mean, if it's recognized by all parties as being something, then...
Well, I think the audience has probably been waiting very patiently all this time to ask questions. I want to make sure we cover all your what you want to know here. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand and let us give you a microphone. Yes, please. And tell us who you are.
My name is Peter Wojciechowski, and I'm with the U.S.-Ukraine Foundation in Washington. I want to thank the audience for this very profound analysis. And there is one issue I wanted to bring up and wanted to hear your comments. One of the slides we showed us, I mean, we all understand that many of the problems of media come from the problem of poverty. As long as there is no real consumer market, dependence on oligarchs and everything. But one of your line items, the key problems you mentioned, was low professionalism of key staff.
Yeah.
I see a bit of a paradox here, because we all know that in the course of Ukraine's struggle for democracy, journalists have been in the forefront. There have been so many journalists who were leading the fight against dictators, oligarchs, Yanukovych, people before him, Gongadze, all through the years. So there are many bright journalists, many famous journalists, investigative journalists, tremendous
Definitely.
breakthroughs made by Ukraine's journalists. What happens to them?
Yeah.
I know that some of them became members of parliament.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
generally, can
definitely.
you comment on the problem of professionalism,
But
please? Thank you.
those slides speaking about weaknesses of media companies, and when we're saying about key staff of media companies, we are speaking about media management, top management, sales management, programming, zero skills on digital, and when in situation when you have a brightest journalist and he work with a dumbest manager, it's the worst situation that you can even ever imagine, because this manager will not give any possibilities to brightest journalist to do his or her job properly. So this is lack of management professionalism. No strategies, no business planning, no good financial management, zero HR. This is what we find out during this SWOT analysis. This is what we're talking about.
No, it really reminds me, the situation that Ukraine is in right now reminds me a bit of where Poland was, in 1996 or so. These kind of problems were common. There was a lack of management capacity, and this was something that had to be filled in by investment and maybe some foreign investors who come in and do this and that sort of thing.
So one of the things is that there's also there's a tendency to focus on training journalists and not treating journalists as part of a newsroom and treating a newsroom. And so on one hand, programs that involve the publisher owner, the editor, and the journalist, and figuring out how that's supposed to work as a newsroom, and also understanding that the journalist is not going to run the newspaper, that you do need to have somebody who knows how to keep the books, and not just an accountant, but how to, seek advertising, how to how to improve layout in order to make it more reader friendly. And so there's all of those elements, understanding that the economic situation is the X factor here, right? That, if you can't generate sufficient advertising revenues, that's its own problem, which also ends up to the other problem of phantom newspapers, for example, right? If you have a medium-sized city that has 15 newspapers because there's ones that pop up that are funded by local oligarchs, it skews the media market, right? So it's a very complex system, but in terms of your question specifically, I think that's the difficulty, is that you can train a fantastic journalist, but if he can't work in an independent newsroom, then what's he supposed to do, right?
Elaine, tell us who you are and...
I'm Elaine Soreo. I'm the Associate Rector of Wisconsin International Ukraine University, a private university in Kiev, Ukraine, which teaches business. Okay. And that is what it is. They have undergraduate degrees in business and graduate degrees that are U.S. and UK accredited. They're the only school that is US-UK accredited in Ukraine that I know of. My question actually was a combination of what we just addressed. Given the dynamics of Ukrainian higher education and its roots in a society that is not business friendly, nor teaching anyplace else the core aspects of business, while you have had indeed excellent journalistic training at many of the universities, the whole bottom structure, there is no foundation for the business. And we go back to then having the oligarchs who have managed the business and so forth. I think that, would you like to address, what would you like to see done in a very specific, highly focused training program? I'm not suggesting an undergraduate degree or a master's degree, but a highly focused training program to turn out literally teams of managers of the media. Thank you.
That's a good question.
Yeah, unfortunately, we do it. We have our own university called Ukrainian Media School, and we for 3 years do media management middle term program. It's 4 months. It's modules on the strategic management, financial management, HR, and marketing. Unfortunately, we have no much resources, so it's about 14 people a year. But this year we also open program on the digital for digital managers, and hopefully sales managers till the end of the year with support of Swedish SIDA. But what we see that for now, it's not much support and not much motivation for donor to support such programs, because when we start speaking about, for example, research, only national government support our activity in building proper audience research for regional TV. And when speaking about sales or other management skills, in many cases, no one said, "Oh, it's too business for us. We want to work more on journalists and."
Я хочу трошки додати. Справа в тому, що як розвиток медіа після отримання незалежності України пішов екстенсивним шляхом, з великою кількістю телерадіокомпаній, так і розвиток журналістських школ пішов так само кількісним шляхом. І на сьогодні мені здається, що класична журналістська освіта потребує докорінного реформування, бо здебільшого 39, мені здається.
Я скажу, у нас дослідження.
Так, докорінного реформування, бо викладають люди, які самі жодного разу не написали жодної статті і не зняли жодного сюжету.
In addition to what was said, I would like to tell you a little bit about the development of mass media after the breakout of the Soviet Union. It went into extensive way and also our journalistic development or training for journalists also went rather into numbers, into quantitative than qualitative way. So, and as of now, I believe that we need to have very deep reforms for the education of journalists. And I believe that because the educators who are involved in training of journalists as of today are mostly those people who have never done anything practically, mostly theoretically, and have not even written any specific articles or any specific materials that would be related to current and modern journalism.
Я можу назвати лише 2 журналістські школи, які готують дійсно людей, які спроможні робити щось в професії. Це магістерка в Українському католицькому університеті і Києво-Могилянська академія.
I can tell you that there are only 2 schools that I can name today that really train and prepare journalists that can handle all the challenges of the profession today. This is the master's degree in Ukrainian Catholic University and also Kyiv-Mohyla University.
Ці інші навчають більш ніж 5 років, але не дають жодних практичних знань і навичок. І люди, які приходять з цих вишів, взагалі не готові працювати в редакціях.
All others train people for 5 years or so, but do not provide practical knowledge and skills that would help them, those graduate help them to work in a current media environment.
І головне, що немає критеріїв, як оцінювати успішність цих журналістських школ.
And also there are no criteria how to evaluate the success of these journalist schools.
Треба змінити парадигму взагалі.
So in general we need to change the paradigm.
In fact, we did evaluate. Last year we had research, the assessment of quality of the educational services provided to journalists. Yes, 42 universities train journalists. And the quality of the services are very, very low. Because, as Tatiana already told, the people who have no practice of editors, of media managers, they teach there. And, universities just earn money. And they understand, we have no the journalist faculty, let's create it. Okay, and they create it, and then they address to to my colleagues and say, "Come on, let's come to please come to us and to teach and become some docents and professors." But we say, "Pardon, but we have no time. We have no we didn't prepare any program." That's okay. Our assistants will prepare. So we just need your PhD. We need the number of PhD as the teachers. Understand? And we asked local journalists, do you have the diploma of journalists? 51% do not. More than the majority, half of local journalists, they never studied journalism, because the industry understands that their needs is something different that university teaches. And this, if we speak about the reform of the journalistic education, it's really needed. We really need much more the modern approach to this. We need to establish the proper dialogue between the industry and the educational establishments in order to make them able to prepare the specialists that will work on the market of media.
That's great. As we've got Scott.
Hi, Martin Zvoners with Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. I wanted to ask a question, and I'm not sure if it was covered a little earlier today, but concerning physical safety of journalists and of journalism. Establishing trust in a community for a journalist always means that you establish a position of independence. We've seen in the cases of Pavel Sheremet, perhaps most prominently, but in numerous other cases, that this is a physical danger for people. And in the cases of any number of investigative journalists, such as the people on our schemes team, that this is a reputational danger as well, because these people are under constant attack on social media, et cetera. What kind of steps are being taken, or is there a recognition that's building that to have that trustworthy media has to also go along with media not being a contact sport?
Yes, really, in Ukraine we have a great problem related to safety of journalists, but it lays in another dimension. Ukrainian journalists are not able to work on Ukrainian territories. They are not able to work in Crimea. They are not able to work on occupied Donbass. Journalists were forced to leave these territories in order to save their lives. This is a problem. If you speak about Sheremet, if you speak about Buzina, here we are waiting for the results of investigation. We do not know who did it, but it's not about the independence of their position. In Ukraine, we have plenty of journalists who have real independent position. And in fact, they did much more dangerous things, and they did much more things that hindered our authorities, our oligarchs, and so on. And still they are alive, thank God. And in fact, it's not about the situation when all Ukrainian journalists who have independent position suffer some pressure. Detector media also suffers pressure in Facebook. You know, that we are called the agents of KGB, the agents of United States, the agents of all the countries in the world. So it's not about the danger. And once again, we speak about the really strange killing like Sheremet and Buzina. We are waiting for the results of investigation.
But are you saying that there is progress in the judicial independence and judicial front? Is that coming, or is it still caught in the old system?
Here it is under control. Here we really watch the process, and we really press our government to receive the balanced investigation.
So they're making efforts to find the real causes of this death. And
the problem, I think it's a bigger problem. It's a problem of ability of our authorities to do their job properly. But in many cases, for me, for example, in case of Sheremet, there is definitely a lack of transparency. So civil activists like Hector, they try pushing to have some information about the progress of investigation, and in overall the communication skills of our government is very, very, very bad. We very as many post-Soviet nations, we very have this close habit of we don't really love to share information, and in the government we have this problem crucially.
So the communication ability of the government really impedes the knowledge about it. Do we have any other questions? Yes, please, Vitaly.
Hi, I'm Vitaly Shpak. I'm here with the National Endowment for Democracy. My question is to Tatiana, and you mentioned quite a few risks that the public broadcaster is facing right now, but what are the guarantees in place that it will remain independent and also, more importantly, financially stable and sustainable?
Це дійсно є проблема. Бо наглядова рада може забезпечувати все ж таки якесь збереження політичної незалежності, тобто охороняти редакційну політику і журналістів від політичних впливів. Поки що це вдається. Редакційна рада може закликати уряд надавати фінансування, але якщо не буде політичної волі, то не лише в Україні, а в усіх інших країнах, наскільки мені відомо, дуже багато випадків, коли через фінансування все ж таки здійснюється тиск. Бо сьогодні наше новостворене суспільне телерадіомовлення фінансується окремим рядком в бюджеті. Це 0,2% від бюджету України. Але поки що, наприклад, в бюджеті України на цей рік не закладена повна сума фінансування.
Yes, you're right, and this is a pressing issue in our country, and the supervisory board can provide political independence. So far, we were able to handle it, and we were able to guarantee this political independence. But we also, and all we can do at this point is to call upon the government to provide sufficient sources, sufficient resources to get this support to support our independence, political independence, and other independence. But if there is no political will, and this is actually relevant and true not only for Ukraine but for any other country, that if there is no political will, then there won't be appropriate financing, but at the same time, there is an opportunity to use financing as a pressure put on media. And as of now, what we have, we are financed from the government budget. There is a separate line item in our budget, and it is about 0.2% that is spent for media in Ukraine. But as of now, for the next fiscal year, there is no money allocated, or so far we haven't seen any money allocated for this item.
There was part of money allocated, but not according to the law on public television in amount that should be on 0.2% of the total national budget. So, of course, supervisory board and the top manager can go to court and appeal against cabinet of ministry and demand the whole amount, but it's very complicated process, and when there is no money in budget, there is no money in budget, and you will have long process of different negotiations and court steps, but it will not be very effective.
Крім того, є ще одна небезпека. Якщо цей бюджет буде бюджетом проїдання, то, вибачте, жодного бюджету не вистачить. Тобто дуже важливо, щоб в цей перший рік було зроблено повну оптимізацію і закладені такі головні основи, щоб вже зворотного не було шляху, щоб точка неповернення була пройдена. І структура була настільки оптимальна, щоб в наступні роки було простіше використовувати цей бюджет. Бо сьогодні просто взяти і сплатити 7 тисячам робітників більшу зарплатню, вибачте, це не дасть жодного результату. Треба спочатку зробити оптимізацію. Це дуже важливо.
It is very important to have optimization and to do it as soon as possible. If we just have the budget that would be spent for salaries and basic needs, then this is not going to work. First of all, especially it is very important for this first year to have this full optimization and implementation of this optimization in our society. This has to include the funds for the media, the way that there is no point of return. That is, so the process is irreversible, and that's why we're talking about not necessarily just funding those 7,000 people that we have or paying their salaries, but rather focusing on structural optimization.
Those kinds of reforms are usually the ones that are really the most difficult, because really successful independent public service broadcasting is usually funded through a separate mechanism that is not through the central budget, and that's where you want to go eventually, and you have to go step by step, but those are the things that sometimes make this whole process so difficult to get success from, because if it stays in the hands of the parliamentarians, they will use their power to influence the media, to influence public broadcasting, and what you really want is a licensing system or something else where the fees are collected, and I hope you can find your way to that. But we know it takes time, and it does sound like you're making some progress. I mean, there does seem to be some political will for this. I think we can close with just one more round, if I could. Is there one more quick question? Yeah. Yeah, one more quick question. Okay.
I'll try to be. Hi, my name is Dominic Ballone. I work for Counterpart International. I concern myself with internet governance and online rights. I just had the good fortune to visit your country for the first time last week, and there I met with a number of government officials who were quite candid in the need to block content online that was deemed as propaganda or pro-separatist within the context of this new term of art, hybrid war. And so I just wanted to get someone's thoughts quickly on how freedom of expression can be preserved while maintaining the country's national security interests.
Okay.
Very good question.
Save the easy question to the end. That's really good. Yeah.
I think it's a very big part of the job of detector media.
It's my field. And I already told the meeting about it, that prohibition, if you speak about prohibition, the blocking of the website that produce some anti-democratic, anti-Ukrainian, some content that produces some hatred and some calls to kill people and so on. Prohibition is the shortest way for stupid people. Yeah. And let's block a couple of hundreds of websites. Tomorrow they will create another couple of hundreds of them, and we'll block them again. And we will allocate more and more resources in order to block more and more websites. So it's a bit stupid. In fact, I asked the people from our special forces, did they analyze the real impact of such websites? Did they assess the amount of danger that they produce? And they told that they did not. They understand that it's danger, but they do not understand it's still so dangerous that allows us to make a decision to allocate such resources to block them. We know that there are some initiatives from the security services, first of all, that claim to block the harmful content. But it's not the decision that the civil society will support, because we understand that the real strategic decision, the strategic solution should be based on media literacy of people. We need to we'd better allocate these resources to media literacy programs to teach our people to choose the proper sources of information, to distinguish propaganda from truth, and to increase the internal resilience of Ukrainian society against all these anti-human and anti-democratic claims. That's why, yes, we have the trends like this, we have the initiatives like this, but I hope that the voice of civil society and the clever part of politicians will be strong enough in order to block these initiatives.
Okay, let's finish up with one. I want to ask each of you to just conclude by telling me one thing that you think we should watch for in the future, or one thing that you would hope for in the next year or two, the most important thing that you think could happen, or a change that you would like to see, and that would make a difference in improving the environment in Ukraine. So, Katerina, why don't you say, what would be the thing that you would most want to see or to happen in the next year or so?
Oh, it's so difficult to choose. I definitely want to see real steps in self-regulation and co-regulation.
Real what?
Steps in
self-regulation.
Self-regulation,
okay.
Co-regulation from our side.
Yeah.
And I really hope to see more fruitful discussion about media sustainability support from the donor and international.
So some donor support from and a stronger national debate about self-regulation.
Yeah, and the sustainability issue from the donors and the international media developer side.
Okay, good. Who wants to go next? Tatiana?
Ну, мені дуже легко відповісти на це запитання. Я мрію про те, щоб вже з 1 вересня на суспільному телебаченні і радіомовленні з'явився принципово новий контент, щоб українське суспільство, по-перше, відчуло ці зміни і зрозуміло, навіщо потрібне суспільне телебачення і радіомовлення, а український політикум нарешті трошки наблизився до рівня відповідальності і просунутості українського суспільства щодо взаємодії і спілкування з медіа.
Actually, for me, it's an easy question. What I am dreaming about is to see the new content on the public broadcasting starting September 1st, to make sure that Ukrainians would really feel the changes, would get those changes, and that the public would understand why we need public broadcasting and what is importance in having public broadcasting, and for the politicians also to support it and to follow it and to be involved rather than lagging behind.
Okay, that's really good. Okay, Roman?
Thank you. I think that I should speak about media literacy, because media literacy is our solution for the future. Is a solution of the great number of problems that we have. Now, unfortunately, the topic is not sexy enough for donors and NGOs. Why so? Because if we have some project related to media literacy, it will not bring us the nice result, measurable result in 2 or 3 years. Because media literacy is a long-term process. But this is a solution for the future, and now we should think about the future.
That's great. Johanna, what are you going to do about this?
Thanks, Mark. I'm not going to answer that. What I am going to answer, so I mean, what I hope for from observing Ukraine is that it does finally turn the corner of irreversibility, basically, right? I mean, I think that there's a couple of key pieces of legislation, but even indications of political will moving to tackle some very key reforms, such as judiciary reform, finally overall, right? And to see that the implementation does finally go forward on a number of others, right, that are currently